Welcome to E-commerce with Coffee, a podcast powered by Amber Engine, where we share e-com secrets for brands over your favorite brew. We start with the caffeine and then leap enthusiastically into behind-the-scenes e-com insights that led to the success of our guests. I'm Nate Svoboda, and I'm about to serve you up the best. Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode of E-commerce with Coffee. In this conversation, we get to speak with Simon Ackers. He's the founder of Archman, which is a performance and growth marketing consultancy that helps brands of all shapes and sizes, from leading global brands to small startups. So today, we're really going to be focusing, though, on the role that performance marketing plays in digital commerce. So, Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Really excited for the conversation today. But before we dive into it, I always ask, so I gotta. You are a very energetic guy. Does coffee or caffeine play any role in your day-to-day?
Good intro. Yes, it does. Enjoy a coffee. I think we've had this conversation before. A few coffees, but bearing in mind it's 3:05 in where I am, and it's a lot earlier in the day where you are, so I'm probably a few coffees up on you, hence the energy.
Yeah, I'm still working through number one here. So.
Oh, okay, you got a long way to go then to catch up with me.
Nope, absolutely. I need to get an espresso machine so I can have a little bit less volume and just get those hits of caffeine.
I've actually got one of these, nice bottles. Actually, LinkedIn sponsored it. Actually, they sent me it, which is nice. But I have to make sure I always top up with water all the time. Otherwise, when you're in an office, it's just easy to go to the drip machine and get coffee, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. Hey, water, I should probably drink more water. That's definitely fair.
I read about it. It's one of those things that everyone thinks they do, but they don't. So.
Yeah, I think I heard that it's like half of your body weight in ounces is like the amount per day that every person is supposed to consume or something like that. Some easy rule of thumb.
Well, I don't know about your audience learning from me, but I've learned something off you there straight away. So I'm going to make it.
Well, there we go. Well, really, I'm very excited to learn a little bit more about performance marketing. So, I guess before we dive into some of the questions that I had, can you give us the high level of, I know you've had a number of roles that have gotten you to starting Archman and where you are today. Can you talk us through that journey a little bit and maybe just some of your highlights and your learnings?
Of course, yeah. I mean, there's quite a broad church of an inquiry there, but I would probably preface with the fact that I started off when my journey in digital marketing and advertising was very much at the data and lead generation end of things, starting at Experian, learning about data, different types of clients and segments, and I got really interested in different types of audiences. And then on the result, I worked with a lead generation company, and we were working with affiliates, and I was learning about performance marketing as a whole, so not just affiliates, but then bringing in search and whatnot. And then I worked with a programmatic trading desk in an agency, so I was learning about programmatic. And I kind of learned the different tenets of digital and performance marketing. Then what I've recently become, I think I mentioned this to you before, I'm not purely a performance guy anymore. I would say I'm a media planner that focuses on good performance and effectiveness of media. So, where I've got that heritage of education on performance, I always temper it with the need to have brand building activity to help complement. And as I always say, you need to breed the fish so you can catch them down the line. So, yeah, I believe in that as a sort of an ecosystem of marketing for sure.
And so I guess what are some of your favorite companies that you've worked with? I mean, I imagine that you've worked with a laundry list of companies, but like what are some of your favorites you can recall?
Oh wow, that's quite a big question. A lot of my work has been directly with clients, and some of it's been through agencies. Like for example, I really like working with clients who have a very interesting call to action that's more than just sign here. For example, I managed once a performance and lead and affiliate campaign for Greenpeace through a network, and it was Save the Arctic. So the goal was to get signatures for a petition so they could take it to the agencies that be and lobby for climate change and sort of help the Arctic. So for me, that was a really nice journey to enable to actually work on that sort of thing. Of course, on the other side of it, I've worked on things that are less altruistic, but ultimately, the fundamental principles remain. Whether you're changing the world or selling a mobile phone, there is always a need for diligent thinking about how you're going to convert your customer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting. So, we're in the Amber Engine is in the world of software, but, a lot of the times the same tenets apply when it comes to your performance marketing, the ways that you're generating leads, how you're converting. So it's fascinating. It really doesn't matter what industry, what type of product you sell, or, whether it's a product or a service. And I know you said your role has sort of morphed a little over time, but talk to us a little bit, if you could, for our audience. How does performance marketing differentiate just from general marketing? Can you give us that definition, how that works?
Yeah, much like my own career path, I think performance marketing has been an evolution. I think before there was advertising and direct response, an ad with a phone number, a print with a coupon. This is the early days performance marketing, right? I think with the advent of digital channels, digital has become inherently associated with performance channels because they're measurable, they're trackable. We've had the benefit of cookies and retargeting, which, I don't know how much longer that's going to go on for, but Google, I don't know, there's lots of talk about the topics, but who knows where we're going with that. But what I would say is performance marketing has kind of, over the last few years, it's become this kind of digital engine alongside what we call above the line traditional advertising. However, in recent years, I would say the definition of performance has blurred now. And my purview is the performance, all media should be performance, all media should be effective. You should have a clear KPI and goal you're trying to achieve with your media. It might not be short term, like if you're doing an outdoor ad or a cinema ad, that can perform. It doesn't mean it's a performance channel, but it is performing in its way. So it's very important to understand that. However, in terms of pure play performance, it's generally digital addressable channels which give you a target outcome or guaranteed outcome.
And this might just be terminology, that one person uses versus another. But would growth marketing and performance marketing be similar things then, or is there an inherent difference there?
Yeah, I think the term growth marketing is quite an interesting one. I'm not the biggest of, when I talk about growth, I was talking about growth of businesses, not just growth marketing, because growth marketing has become the preserve of a kind of there's that kind of startup, post-VC culture of growth hacking and growth marketing. And I just feel that growth marketing in itself is quite it's like food that stops you being hungry. It's the same thing, right? Growth marketing, all marketing should be helping with growth, right? So I would rather...
That's a fair point.
Yeah. If you're marketing and it's not releasing in growth, then clearly there's something wrong and you should speak to good marketing consultants, right? But I would say with performance is a lot more linear and a lot more an area of defined interest within the marketing ecosystem, whereas growth marketing is just a much more of an ethereal term.
Right. And, you hear people throw around acronyms like PPC, et cetera. What are some of the tools in your arsenal when it comes to performance marketing? Can you, there's probably a million. Can you maybe just narrow some of those down for us?
When you say tools, do you mean like software or principles? What do you mean? Sorry.
Principles. So, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Because you're a tool, you're tools and software. So I don't know if we were going to go down a techie route there, but thrilled that we're not. So, yeah, look, I think there's a number of principles that primarily come down to acronyms of KPIs. So things like CPA. CPA is obviously, the number of conversions divided by the cost of the media. So you work out a cost per acquisition, so how much it costs. However, in recent years, ROAS and ROI have become much more interesting acronyms if we're going to go down that route. So return on investment or return on ad spend. So if I spend $1,000 and I get 4,000 back, I'm working on a 4-to-1 ROAS. ROAS, by the way, stands for return on ad spend, for those who don't know. And that can be a useful proxy to a degree for, okay, if I know I'm spending this and I'm getting this ROAS, you want at least a 1 ROAS because you want to, more than break even, and maybe 2-to-1 ideally. But there is short-term changes to it, and I always talk about the evolving KPI, which is something I'm going to talk about next year on a conference. And later on this year rather. The evolving KPI is very important because in the short term you'll look at ROAS. It's a great way to lever. We're getting 3-1, 4-1. But as you grow, you cannot expect to get the same ROAS. And I wrote in a book, I said, look, if you spend 4,000 and you get 20,000, you've got a 5-1 ROAS. But if you spend 4 million, that does not necessarily mean you're going to get 20 million. That 5-1 ROAS will diminish. So you have to be prepared to send your ROAS target in the wrong direction, to send your revenue growth in the right direction.
Yeah. And I mean, if I'm reading that right, that part of that is because there's so many lagging indicators in marketing. One thing that I've heard a lot in conversations is when a brander, starts engaging with an agency, they're not seeing the results within a specified time period, but that's because there's so many lagging indicators. It takes time, and to the point you just made, you got to spend money to make money, right?
Absolutely, yes. And there's a law of diminishing return. It's an economic term, but it's also used in performance. If I'm going back to the fish analogy, if I'm got a paid search campaign that's picking up all these inbound conversions, I'm picking up all the fish that are swimming at the top of the pool, right? And then over time, as you keep fishing and spend more, you go a bit deeper into the pool. But if you keep going, there's not enough in the pool. So there is a diminishing return. There's only so much of an addressable high intent audience. So marketing's duty, cross-channel, is to bring more fish into that pond for you to ultimately fish for later.
Right. And, obviously marketing works with sales in different ways throughout the sales funnel. So this is probably also a very broad question, but at what points in the sales funnel is performance marketing most beneficial? Or, maybe this might be easier. How does the way in which performance marketing applies change depending on where you're at in the sales funnel?
Yeah, good question. I think, like, say I'm a B2B SaaS company, right? I probably do a trade show. Maybe I'm in Vegas for a trade show, right? Now, there's a real paradox there because you might be going as a rep or an SDR or an account exec and you're meeting prospective or existing clients. You might be looking to close some deals or book some meetings. Now, you are a walking, talking performance marketer, but in a very much brand awareness environment of a trade show. No one would ever pay for a trade stand at CES, right? Unless they've got some serious cash. But secondly, it's not a performance play. It's like, yeah, we got some KPIs, want to get X amount of leads, but you'd buy it. It's more of the brand awareness. It's more about having mental availability. It's more about, can we afford not to be there, right? So there's that offline part, which I think often conflates, between offline and online. In terms of the other part of your question, I think it depends on the type of client as well, the type of journey. So say, for example, I'm an e-commerce company and I'm selling trainers. I would want that sales... I straight away, I might have a carousel ad of my favourite Yeezys, whatever, and I want you to click on buy now, shop now, and go through direct to the product path and purchase. Whereas if I'm a B2B company and it's a longer sales cycle, it might be a sort of a mid-funnel performance play where you're looking to get demand generation and you're driving into a page where there is more information with a request for information, so you fill out details and then a rep gets in touch. So I think it really depends on the product type and sort of the environment in which it's in. So I'll answer that question effectively.
No, yeah, that's absolutely fair. And so, a lot of times companies are thinking about, okay, get more customers, but then obviously there's a huge component and importance to lifetime value. How can performance marketing also play a role in developing deeper relationships with existing customers, not just acquiring new ones?
That is a brilliant question. And actually, I'm part of a performance marketing forum where I asked a similar question because I asked a question on the hypothesis of discount codes and vouchers, because my hypothesis, and based on general anecdotal experience over the years, aggregated across a number of clients, is that discount codes are a great way to get clients on. But number one, they don't drive lifetime value because people might be in the mindset of, I've got a deal, I'm going to cancel now and go somewhere else where there's a deal. Secondly, existing customers, it can really piss them off because they're like, hang on a minute, new customers are getting the new deal, new customers are getting the new deal, right? So in terms of retention marketing, it's an interesting question you pose. And again, dependent on the B2B or B2C arena it's in, there's ways in which you want to make sure that your existing customers are the happy customers, but also could be advocates. So it might be a case of using your CRM program to, do a referral scheme. You'll get a month free of this platform if they get a month free and things like that. So I think you can build in referral and advocacy of client relationships if you can use the CRM and sort of referral ways. Quite smart, I think.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. It seems like there's so many things that you need to do, and so therefore so many things that could be done wrong when it comes to performance marketing, or maybe just not in the best way possible. What are some of the most common things or problems that companies are experiencing when they come to work with you, or maybe you don't end up working with them, but you do an audit and you talk to them?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 2 or 3 things off the bat. Firstly, I think mismanaged expectations. Like I meet clients who, sadly, there is a lot of snake oil in the industry that would pitch a client saying, we're going to guarantee an 8-to-1 ROAS, or we're forecasting a revenue growth via SEO of this and that. And you can make inferences and you can do forecasting tools and everything, but I think it's a dangerous slope. So I think mismanaged expectations from bad players is a big, obstacle to overcome. However, I would say that the other mistake that people can make is, again, not knowing that those ROAS targets can change. So like I say, if you're an 8-to-1, you want to grow by revenue, you're going to have to sometimes send the ROAS down to make more money. And I think people sometimes see a drop in ROAS or an increase in CPA as a bad thing. But actually, when short-term marketing KPIs aren't mapped to the bigger business outcome and there's no communication between the board and the marketer, that is a big problem as well. So my 2 things would be, number 1, go with an open mind to sort of, test and learn and don't listen to what some bad players said. And secondly, get the CFO and the CMO or the performance manager on the same page, because you want to make sure all your goals are mapped to the business and not some arbitrary CPA target.
No, absolutely. And my favorite thing out of what you just said, it's about having somebody who can read that data and make those claims, right? Who can understand the value that it's having to the business and be that bridge, that communication bridge. We already talked a little bit about marketing having lots of lagging indicators. How long should campaigns generally be run? Like when you want to make adjustments, right? What is that period of time, or how do you assess what that period of time is to actually be running those tests and making those adjustments?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of channels that have different ways of working on this. Like you can learn quite quickly on search and social or whatever what the performance is and what the conversion rate is to the audience. The click-through rate, that sort of thing. Some things like programmatic, when it's doing audience discovery and it's going out there, broad reach, it's learning all the time, and a lot of machine learning in the programmatic platforms are encouraging this. So you keep something on live for a few weeks, you see how it goes, and then you amend accordingly. The big problem, of course, is people have conflated the ability to make changes and optimize frequently with thinking they have to do it all the time, right? I always say, just because you can press the button doesn't mean you should press it, right? So if something is going a bit not great for a couple of days, the knee-jerk reaction is to say, oh no, pause that, that's in the red, not amber, let's get rid of it. But actually sometimes it's worth, if you know the context around it, like, oh, CPA went up because that was out of stock or that site was down, just know the context, take a breath, give it another week, and then see how you're getting on. I think I see a lot of knee-jerking on optimizations. Test and learn, yes. I'm all about test and learn. If something's not good, you kill it and you move on. Absolutely. But don't prematurely, kill something which could become good.
And I know we're trying to keep this conversation a little bit more strategic, but when we were talking about these KPIs, what are some of those KPIs that really should help make the decision for a brand of whether or not a particular channel is working for them? Like what are like the guiding lights that you should be using?
If I'm a food and drinks brand, for example, I would be wanting to look at share of voice, share of market, looking at database to see what, from brand recall and brand studies, what share of voice does this company have? Because, if I'm selling, Lipton tea or something, right, it's not about performance and CPA. It's about, right, am I selling more than, another tea? I mean, you guys in America, like, you're not, you don't drink tea like us, but okay, maybe a different kind of brand, Oreos versus, Reese's, right? These are just competing for the same mental availability for people on the shelves in Walmart and Target, right? So it's kind of like, right, that's the KPI, share of voice and things like that. But then I guess if you're an e-commerce company and your route to market is online, therefore you need to drive online traffic, you would look at the platforms such as paid social or paid search, and you would make a target CPA accordingly or a target ROAS. So I think it depends on where you are in the journey. Again, if you are selling a SaaS product, you wouldn't do a CPA, you would probably do a CPL, a cost per lead, because actually the good conversion is getting a qualified lead sent into your CRM for your SDR to follow up on. If you were doing CPA, there's way too much out of the control and purview of the marketing system, so therefore it would be unfair to mark it up or down accordingly.
Interesting. No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, one other thing that has been, I don't know, I feel like every industry this has been a problem for, has been talent, right? The availability of people that have the skills to, the analytical skills to read data and, some of those things we were just talking about. What are some of those critical skills that a brand should be looking for in someone to perform this role for them, so that it doesn't just become a money suck, right? Let's say that they can't afford to work with an agency. I guess what should they be looking for?
I think data has stories in it, the ability to story tell, not like, fables, but actually paint a picture of the reality of what's going on and look at it, the bigger picture, and be able to look at the data and say, that CPA's gone up, but it's okay because that was down, or that ROAS has really spiked, but to be fair, there was a TV campaign last week. It's having that holistic view of being able to tell the story and understand context just outside the Google Doc. Because I think people become like slaves to the spreadsheet, and the spreadsheets tell you a numerical truth, but they don't measure some of the softer things. They don't measure the story and the context behind it. They don't measure always the efficacy of certain messages. So I would say a great skill set to have is to be close to creativity and the creative team in this. Don't just look at the numbers. Think about the softer qualitative stuff behind it that's making the quantitative Excel stuff what it is. That's what I'd say.
No, absolutely. I love that. Business acumen. I feel like that's one of the unsung talents that people need to have in any business context, right? And again, to be able to bridge that gap between the people who are on maybe the more technology side and then the business side.
Yeah, so on a rudimentary division, older generations and old school media people, they might have not learnt their trade in performance and digital. They probably learnt it in TV and print and cinema. So they're like, what's all this performance stuff, right? But then you got these people coming through now who are growth hacking and coding their way to CPAs and ROAS, but they don't understand the value and the importance of having the gravitas of a paid ad that's big, in the cinema. So, or Times Square. So there is something to learn off each other. There is a digital data literacy that can be learned here with a wider understanding over there. And I think that's often the best work I've seen, and the best campaigns and teams I've worked in have always had that mutual respect and understanding, I think.
No, that's fair. Now, the last question that I had for you, a lot has taken place in marketing in the past 10 years, let's just call it. But thinking more in the last two-ish, right? Obviously, COVID, that's been a huge disruptor for people in the world. What are some of the more notable changes that you've seen, let's say in the past 2 to 3 years?
Okay, so of course, COVID meant there was people who were at home, people starting smaller businesses. Shopify's share price went through the roof, which means there's more Facebook ads, more players doing it, some better than others, driving up CPMs, driving up costs, driving up the competition. I myself, in my own company, I had to pivot and think, because some of my consulting work had to pause for whatever reason. So I had to think quickly about how can I sharpen my own axe, and it was almost like creating my own marketing director on demand package. Now, brands that have come out of COVID are the ones who've sort of seen that shift change in competition, and they've sort of they've used it in a way to sharp, like that saying, the obstacle is the way, it's important to sort of look at the competition, actually carve out your own niche as well. And there's other things as well, like brand safety and the rise of the hate against Facebook and the rise of TikTok. So, for example, people came off Facebook, so Facebook was a lot cheaper for a while because people virtue signaled their way off the platform. That was a big thing. The growth of TikTok and shoppable commerce, initially that was low CPAs and high ROAS because it was less discovered, but now that's been said, I've said it and other people have said it, it's more competitive. So I think it's understanding the platform ebb and flow amongst as well as the backdrop of the pandemic, that these things are cyclical, and having that constant measurement plan and test and learn mindset keeps you fresh to that.
Yeah, that's fair. I love that you mentioned shoppable commerce, because some of my fastest impulse purchases have been from TikTok or Instagram where, I'll see an ad, it's under $20. You know what?
Definitely.
Fine, I'm going to buy that thing.
Yeah.
Well, if this is really appreciate the
conversation. If this is going out before or after the 8th of March, I might be safe to say I got my dad something like a T-shirt for one of his favourite bands, right? And that was shoppable. I saw it on the ad because obviously I've got this paranoia that they retarget me based on what I'm talking about. And anyway, I saw it and I tapped it and I was like, T-shirt, 25 quid back.
No, absolutely.
I'm the biggest sucker for this. And shoppable commerce is becoming increasingly powerful, but then it's important to not be disingenuous with the wrong kind of, influencers and things like that as well.
No, absolutely. I guess before we end the conversation, is there anything else that, maybe we didn't hit on that you think is at least worth mentioning, that you think our audience should be aware of?
I think it's accepting that channels are not arbitrary. I've always said this, and actually wrote about it recently in my newsletter, Front of Mind, which I can share with you for the notes. But essentially, Facebook is known for sales driving, traffic driving campaigns. But these performance channels can be used for brand. So I can do a reach and frequency buy on Facebook. I could use affiliates to do a tenancy and a takeover of a site. I could use paid search to do, branded terms or generic terms, so I can actually build up my brand on search. On the other side of it, don't ever write off the traditional media opportunity to drive performance. It's been proven time and time again through walk data that TV campaigns in cohort with a search campaign drives phenomenal uplift. It's shown that digital audio now, if it's hyper-targeted and you're walking near a Westfield and they play an ad for a shop there within a ring-fenced area, it drives footfall. So the point being is that you can use traditional channels with data points, addressable TV, digital out-of-home and audio to drive a engagement, and at the same time, your performance channels traditionally can do the other way around as well.
To me, that embodies the idea of omnichannel, right? Yeah. It's important that you be thinking about all of the channels in your ecosystem and how you're going to engage with them, right?
Correct.
Well, Simon, really appreciate the conversation. I personally have learned a lot. Where can our listeners get in touch with you if, something we've talked about resonated or they want to bug you and engage in your services?
Yeah, sure. Add me on LinkedIn, Simon Akers. You can contact me. My website's archman.com. You can contact me at simon@archman.com. And we're available on the socials. So Archman Live on Instagram, Archman Tweets on Twitter, and the Archman page on LinkedIn.
Awesome, Simon. Well, really appreciate you joining us today and look forward to having you back on in the future.
Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, Nate.
Thanks, Simon. That's it for this episode of E-Commerce with Coffee, powered by Amber Engine. If you haven't gotten your fix yet, be sure to get more e-commerce brand secrets on our website at amberengine.com. And don't forget to subscribe for more episodes.